It was a quiet winter night. The small town was sleeping under a silver sky. Snow covered the streets, and the air was cold enough to make every breath turn into mist. Inside his small wooden house, Daniel sat near the fire reading a book beside him. His old dog Rex rested on the floor, tail slowly moving as if dreaming. Everything was peaceful, until Rex suddenly lifted his head. His ears stood straight, his body tense. Daniel looked up, surprised. "What is it, boy?" he asked, but Rex was already on his feet. The dog growled low, staring at the door as if someone was standing outside. Daniel frowned. The night was too late for visitors, and the streets were always empty at this hour. Before he could react, Rex barked loudly and ran to the back door. The door rattled as the dog scratched, begging to go out. Daniel hesitated, but finally opened it. Cold air rushed inside. Rex leaped into the snow, his paws leaving quick marks as he ran straight into the darkness. "Rex!" Daniel shouted, his voice sharp in the night. But the dog did not stop. He barked again, the sound echoing between the trees at the edge of the town. Daniel grabbed his coat and a small flashlight. His breath was heavy as he hurried after his dog. The snow crunched under his boots. The night felt colder now, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Rex's barks grew fainter, deeper into the woods. Daniel's heart beat faster. Something was wrong. This was not the way Rex usually acted. The dog was brave, yes, but never reckless, never running without reason. Branches cracked under Daniel's steps. The beam of his flashlight cut through the black trees. He called again. "Rex, come back!" No answer, only the whisper of the wind through the forest. He pushed forward, following the fresh paw prints in the snow. After a few minutes, he heard Rex barking again. But this time it was different. It was not the sound of a dog chasing a rabbit or a fox. It was sharp, urgent, almost like a warning. Daniel quickened his pace, his breath fogging the air. His flashlight shook in his hand, light jumping across the shadows. The forest was silent except for the barking. No owl, no rustle of leaves, no distant sound of cars from the town. Only the lonely echo of Rex's voice. Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. It was as if the whole world had frozen to watch what was about to happen. He stepped into a small clearing. The barking stopped. His light swept across the open snow. And then he saw Rex. The dog was standing still, his fur raised, tail stiff, eyes locked on something ahead. Daniel whispered softly, "What is it, boy?" He lifted the flashlight. At first, he thought it was just a pile of snow, but then it moved. A small figure crouched on the ground, shivering. Daniel's breath caught. It was not a child from the town. The figure was too thin, its skin glowing faintly blue in the light. Its eyes reflected the beam like two small stars. Wide and frightened, it was wrapped in something torn. Not clothes Daniel had ever seen. Rex whined softly and stepped closer. The figure flinched but did not run. Its hands were small, long-fingered, shaking from the cold. Daniel froze, his mind racing. What was this? Who or what was this? For a moment, the forest felt unreal. The trees stood like dark walls, the snow silent beneath them. The childlike figure shivered again, hugging itself tightly. Daniel's heart softened despite his fear. It looked so weak, so lost. He lowered the flashlight slightly. Not to blind it, Rex moved closer, tail wagging slowly now. The figure raised its eyes to Daniel. There was no anger, no danger in those eyes. Only fear and loneliness. Daniel took one step forward. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, though he knew the figure would not answer. The glowing eyes blinked and the creature made a soft sound, a whimper almost like a cry. Daniel's chest tightened. Who could leave a child like this out here in the freezing night? Before he could take another step, a distant sound echoed through the forest. A low hum, mechanical, strange. Daniel turned his head sharply. Somewhere far, but not too far. Lights flickered between the trees. The figure on the ground tensed, its glowing eyes widening in terror. Rex barked once more, but this time not at the child. He barked toward the sound in the distance. Daniel realized with a rush of dread. Someone or something else was coming, and whatever it was searching. The night no longer felt empty. It felt alive, dangerous. Daniel looked down at the small figure shivering in the snow, and in that moment he knew his life had just changed forever. Daniel stood frozen. The sound in the forest was still there, a low hum rolling through the trees like a warning, but his eyes could not leave the strange figure in the snow. The child, because that's what it looked like. A child was shivering so hard its small body shook. Blue skin glowed faintly under the moonlight, and every breath came out in short clouds of mist. Rex moved first. The dog wagged his tail slowly, stepping toward the creature with careful steps. Daniel held his breath, ready to pull his dog back. But the alien child did not move away. Instead, it stared at Rex with wide, glowing eyes. The dog bent his head, sniffed softly, and then sat down beside it as if to say, "It's safe." Daniel's chest tightened. If his dog trusted this thing, then maybe it was not dangerous. Still, he stepped closer with caution. His flashlight shook in his hand and his boots cracked the snow. The child flinched, hugging itself tighter. Daniel crouched down, lowering the light so it would not blind the creature. "Hey," he whispered, his voice softer than the wind. "I won't hurt you." The child blinked, its eyes shining like glass. Then it made a small sound, high, broken like the cry of a bird. Daniel's heart ached. It was just a child, lost, weak, alone. But not a human child. Its ears were small and sharp, its fingers long and delicate, and on its arms he could see faint marks, scratches, burns, or maybe something worse. He wanted to ask questions, but what could he ask? Where did you come from? Who left you here? Why are they hunting you? The child would not understand. Instead, he tried something simpler. He slowly reached out his hand, palm open, the way people did when calming a scared animal. Rex gave a soft bark, encouraging. The alien child tilted its head, studying the hand for a long, breathless moment. It did not move. Then very slowly, it lifted one trembling hand and touched his fingers. Its skin was icy cold, but the touch was light. Careful, almost human. Daniel swallowed hard. This was real, not a dream, not a story. A creature from the stars was sitting in front of him, and it was afraid, and somehow it was asking him for help. The humming sound grew louder for a moment, then faded. Lights flashed again between the trees. The child jerked, pulling its hand back. Eyes wide with terror, it made a strange sound. Repeating it again and again. Daniel didn't know the word, but he understood the feeling, fear. Whatever was out there, it was not here to save the child. It was hunting. Daniel looked around, his breath fogging the cold air. The forest seemed darker now, every shadow dangerous if he stayed here. They would find the child. If he left it, the poor thing would die in the snow. His thoughts raced. No one in town would believe this, and if someone saw it, they might hand it over to whoever was searching. He looked at Rex. The dog was sitting proudly beside the child, as if guarding it, loyal, fearless. Daniel's decision formed in his chest, heavy but unshakable. He could not walk away, not from this, not from a child, human or alien. "All right," he whispered. He took off his thick coat and gently wrapped it around the small figure. The child flinched at first, but then leaned into the warmth. Its glowing eyes softened, almost closing. Daniel lifted it carefully into his arms, surprised at how light it was, too light, like carrying a bundle of sticks instead of a body. Rex barked once, eager to move. Daniel nodded. They had to get out of the forest before the hunters came closer. Step by step, he hurried back through the snow, his boots slipping, his arms tight around the fragile creature. Every crack of a branch made him turn his head. Every shadow felt like eyes watching. Finally, the lights of his small house appeared between the trees. Relief washed over him, but only for a moment. He had no plan, no idea what to do next. All he knew was that he had brought something impossible into his life, something that might change everything. Inside the house, the fire still burned low. Daniel placed the child on the couch, covering it with more blankets. Rex curled up on the rug beside it, guarding like a soldier. The child's glowing eyes followed Daniel's every move. It made another sound, soft and trembling. Daniel didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. "Thank you." He sat down slowly, staring at the strange little being now in his home. He should have been afraid. He should have called someone, but instead, he felt something else, responsibility. This child had no one, and somehow it had chosen him. The night outside was still alive with danger. The hum returned again, this time closer. Shadows passed by his window. Quick and sharp, Daniel's blood ran cold. They were searching the town now, and it was only a matter of time before they came knocking on his door. The child shivered again under the blankets. Its glowing eyes closed slowly. Daniel watched, his hand resting on Rex's fur. The dog's ears twitched, alert, ready, whatever was happening. It was only the beginning, and deep in his heart, Daniel knew one thing for certain. By saving this child tonight, he had stepped into a story far bigger than himself, a story that might not let him go. The night grew colder. Daniel sat near the couch, staring at the small alien child wrapped in blankets. The fire crackled softly. Shadows danced across the walls. Rex lay close to the couch, his eyes never leaving the strange little figure. The room felt different now, as if the entire house was holding its breath. Outside, the hum of machines faded into the distance, but Daniel knew they would be back. Whoever was searching would not stop until they found the child. He rubbed his forehead, his mind heavy with questions. What was he supposed to do now? The child shifted under the blanket, letting out a soft sound. Its glowing eyes half opened, weak but aware. Daniel leaned closer, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe here." The child blinked slowly, then raised one hand. On its wrist was a small band of metal. Thin and strange, it pulsed with a dim blue light. Almost like a heartbeat, Daniel reached out. But before he could touch it, the child pulled its arm back. It clutched the band tightly. Shaking its head, Daniel froze, realizing this was important, maybe even dangerous. The child didn't want him to touch it, but why? Rex whined softly, sensing the tension. Daniel sat back, sighing. He wasn't sure what he had brought into his home, but he knew one thing: the child was not just lost. It was being hunted, and the hunters were close. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught his eye. He turned toward the window. At first, he thought it was only moonlight reflecting on the snow, but then he saw it. A small device lying half buried near the edge of his yard. It blinked faintly, the same cold light as the machines in the forest. Daniel's heart pounded. They had left it behind, a tracker, a beacon, or maybe something worse. He stood quickly, pulling the curtain shut. "They know," he whispered to himself. "They know where you are." The child stirred. Sensing his fear, it made a low sound, almost a cry. Daniel returned to the couch, kneeling beside it. He wanted to promise safety, but could he? He didn't even understand what was happening. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Only the crackle of fire and the faint wind outside. Then the child did something unexpected. It touched its wristband gently and pressed a small mark. The band glowed brighter, and for a brief second, a flicker of light filled the air above it. Daniel gasped. It was not random light. It was an image, faint, broken, like a hologram. He saw shapes, tall shadows, a sky filled with fire, and then the image vanished. The child fell back, exhausted, but Daniel understood one thing. The child was not from here. It had run from something terrible. He sat back heavily, his thoughts racing. He wanted to deny it, to say it was impossible, but the evidence was right in front of him. An alien child in his home, hunted by machines that were still out there. Waiting, Rex suddenly lifted his head and growled. Daniel stiffened, footsteps, slow, heavy, passed by outside. Someone was walking through the snow. Close to his door, Daniel froze, barely breathing. The child's glowing eyes widened in fear. It pressed closer to the couch, clutching the blanket. The footsteps stopped, silence, then a low mechanical whir. Daniel's blood turned cold. They were scanning. The hunters were right outside his house. He held his breath, gripping Rex's collar to keep him quiet. The dog trembled with silent rage, ready to bark. The child buried its face in the blanket, shivering. Seconds felt like hours. The whir moved away, slowly fading back into the night. Daniel exhaled, his body shaking. That had been too close. They were not safe here, not for long. He looked at the child again. Its glowing eyes searched his face, as if begging him not to give up. "All right," Daniel muttered, more to himself than to the child. He stood and paced the room. If he told the town, they might hand the creature over. If he did nothing, the hunters would return stronger, closer. He had only one choice: keep the child hidden. It was a dangerous secret, a secret that could destroy him if discovered. But looking at the small, fragile figure shivering under his blankets, Daniel knew he could not betray it. No matter what, he had to protect this child. The fire burned low. Shadows deepened across the room. Daniel sat back down, watching the door. Rex pressed against his leg, ears sharp, guarding. The child finally drifted into a restless sleep, its glowing wristband pulsing softly in the dark. Daniel whispered into the silence, "You're not alone anymore." But deep down, he also knew something else. By choosing to protect this child, he had invited danger into his life, danger that would come back, soon, and when it did, he would have to be ready. The night was not over. Daniel sat in the dark, every muscle tense. The alien child slept uneasily on his couch. Wrapped in layers of blankets, Rex lay near the door, ears twitching at every sound. Outside, the snow-covered street was silent. But Daniel knew silence could be dangerous. The hunters were out there. Their machines had already passed his house once, and they would come again. Daniel could still picture the blinking device in the snow near his yard. It had to be some kind of tracker, which meant his home was no longer safe. He stood by the window, pulling the curtain slightly open. Moonlight spilled across the white ground. No movement now, no shadows, but his gut twisted with unease. The child stirred in its sleep, letting out a soft whimper. The wristband on its arm glowed faintly, almost like a heartbeat calling out in the night. Daniel clenched his fists. He could not stay here if they found the child. They would not knock on the door. They would break it down and nothing would stop them. Not even him. He looked at Rex. The dog seemed to understand, his eyes steady. Waiting for orders, Daniel grabbed his old backpack. He stuffed it with a few things: water, bread, a flashlight, a small knife. It wasn't much, but there was no time. He pulled on his thick coat and boots. Then he crouched beside the couch, gently shaking the child awake. "Hey," he whispered. "We have to go." The glowing eyes opened slowly, confused and afraid. The child made a soft sound. Shaking its head weakly, Daniel sighed. "I know you're tired, but it's not safe here." He lifted the small body into his arms again. Light as air, the child clung to him this time, fingers cold but tight on his coat. Rex barked once, low and urgent. Daniel froze, listening, and then he heard it, a distant hum growing louder. The machines were back, moving closer. He cursed under his breath. They're already here. He slipped out the back door into the freezing night. Snow crunched under his boots as he hurried into the trees. The forest loomed dark and endless. Branches clawed at his coat as he pushed forward. Rex ran ahead, barking once, then going silent. He was guiding them through the safest path. Behind him, the hum grew stronger. Lights flickered between the trees. Sharp and cold, they were searching again. Daniel's heart pounded, every breath burning in his chest. The child trembled in his arms, whispering strange words in fear. Daniel didn't understand the language, but he understood the meaning: terror. Suddenly, a beam of light swept across the forest. Daniel ducked behind a tree, pressing the child close to his chest. The light passed slowly. Scanning the ground, he held his breath. Rex stood still beside him, silent, ears flat. The beam moved on. Fading into the distance, Daniel exhaled shakily. They couldn't keep running like this. He needed somewhere safe, hidden. He thought of an old hunting cabin deeper in the woods. Abandoned for years, no one went there anymore. It might be their only chance. "Come on, boy," he whispered to Rex. They moved again, following the narrow trail deeper into the forest. Snow fell softly from the branches above. The cold cut into his skin, but he pushed forward. Every step felt heavier, but he did not stop. Behind them, the hum grew sharper, closer. The machines were faster. Daniel could hear the crack of branches breaking under their weight. He quickened his pace, heart racing. The child whimpered again, clutching him tighter. He whispered softly, "Hold on. Just hold on." The cabin appeared at last, a dark shadow between the trees. Its roof sagged under years of snow, but the walls still stood. Daniel hurried inside. Pushing the broken door open with his shoulder, dust and cold air greeted him. The place smelled of rot and wood, but it was shelter. He placed the child gently on the floor. Rex ran in after them, circling the room. Daniel quickly closed the door and covered the cracks with an old blanket. The hum outside grew louder. They were close, too close. The child's wristband glowed brighter now, pulsing fast. Daniel frowned. Crouching beside it, "What are you hiding?" he whispered. The child lifted its hand weakly. Pressing the band again for a moment, another broken hologram flickered in the air. This time, Daniel saw something terrifying. The hunters, dark figures with metal masks, standing over flames. They were not here to rescue. They were here to kill. The image vanished. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He understood now. This child was running from them. And if they caught it, they would destroy it. And maybe him too. Suddenly, a loud crash shook the cabin. The machines had found them. The door rattled as heavy steps pressed closer. Daniel grabbed his knife, though it felt useless against what was outside. Rex growled, his teeth bared, ready to fight. The child's glowing eyes filled with tears. It whispered one word, soft, broken, but clear. "Hide." Daniel's chest tightened. He had no choice. This was not just a chase anymore. It was a war for survival, and it was only beginning. The cabin was dark. Wind whistled through cracks in the old wood, carrying the smell of snow and pine. Daniel leaned against the wall, breathing hard. The alien child sat wrapped in his coat. Glowing eyes half shut but watchful, Rex lay beside it. His body curled protectively around the small figure. For the first time since this nightmare began, Daniel felt a moment of stillness, but it was not peace. It was only the silence before another storm. He knew the hunters were still close. Their machines had circled the woods, leaving strange blinking devices buried in the snow. It was only a matter of time before they found the cabin. Daniel's eyes returned to the child. It looked so small on the dusty wooden floor. Its chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. The wristband on its arm still pulsed faintly. Whatever this child had escaped from had broken it, body and spirit. Yet in the middle of all that fear, there was trust. The child looked at Daniel differently now, not just with fear, but with hope. Rex nudged the child with his nose, wagging his tail slowly. The alien's thin hand reached out. Trembling, it rested against the dog's fur. For the first time, Daniel saw a faint smile on its face, small, fragile, but real. His heart tightened. He never thought his old dog would be the bridge between worlds, but here it was, one creature of Earth, one from the stars, sitting side by side like family. Daniel crouched beside them. "You like him, huh?" he whispered softly. The child blinked, tilting its head. Not understanding the words, but it understood the tone. It gave a soft sound, almost like laughter. A sound so pure that it filled the old cabin with warmth. For a brief moment, Daniel forgot the danger outside. Still, survival came first. He pulled bread from his bag and broke it into small pieces. He offered some to the child. At first, it hesitated. Its glowing eyes studied the food like it was poison. But when Rex licked the crumbs from Daniel's palm, the child reached out slowly. It placed the bread against its lips, then ate with careful bites. Daniel sighed in relief. At least it could eat human food. Hours passed. The fire Daniel managed to spark in the old stove gave weak warmth. The child curled against Rex, finally drifting into deeper sleep. Daniel sat awake, knife in hand, eyes on the door. Every crack of a branch outside made his body stiffen. But the night dragged on, and somehow they made it to morning. The snow outside glowed silver blue under the rising sun. Daniel opened the door just a crack. Peering out, the forest was still. No machines, no hunters in sight. But the strange blinking device they had seen before, it was closer now. Someone had moved it, inching toward the cabin. "They know," Daniel whispered, his voice grim. He shut the door and turned to the child. Its glowing eyes opened as if it had heard him. The child sat up, weak but alert. It pressed its wristband again. A flicker of light appeared in the air, another broken hologram. This time Daniel saw something different. Not war, not fire, but a family, tall figures with the same glowing eyes. Holding the small child between them, their hands rested gently on its shoulders. The image was filled with warmth and love, then it broke apart, fading into nothing. Daniel's throat tightened. The child wasn't just running. It had lost everything, and somehow, it had ended up in his arms instead. The child looked at him, whispering a sound, repeating it. He didn't know the word. But the way it said it, the soft tone, the pleading eyes, it was the same as a human child asking, "Please don't leave me." Daniel reached out and touched its shoulder gently. "You're safe with me," he whispered. He didn't know if the child understood, but its eyes softened and it leaned closer. Rex gave a happy bark as if sealing the promise. That moment changed something inside Daniel. He wasn't just protecting a stranger anymore. He was protecting a child who had lost everything. A child who trusted him. That bond was stronger than fear, stronger than logic, stronger than the danger outside. But danger was still waiting. That afternoon, Rex growled again, low and sharp. Daniel peeked through a crack in the wall, and his stomach dropped. 3 dark figures were moving through the trees, tall, metal-like, with glowing red eyes scanning the snow. The hunters, they were close, too close. Daniel's mind raced. The cabin would not protect them for long. He had to move, but where? The town was no longer safe. The forest was crawling with machines. He had only one thought, maybe the caves near the river. Old, deep hidden, he had gone there as a boy. If they could reach it, maybe they could vanish from the hunter's sight. He packed quickly, slipping bread and water into his bag. The child watched him, eyes wide. It seemed to understand. Danger was near again. Rex barked once, sharp, ready to lead. Daniel crouched and looked at the child. "Stay quiet, stay close," he whispered. The child nodded weakly, clutching his coat as he lifted it into his arms. The hunter's steps crunched against the snow outside. Every second felt heavier. But Daniel had no time left. The bond had been made. The choice had been taken. This was not about survival anymore. It was about protecting someone who had no one else. As Daniel slipped into the trees with Rex leading the way, the child's glowing eyes watched him with trust. And in that moment, Daniel knew he was not just running anymore. He was fighting for something greater. The bond was sealed, and it would guide him through whatever came next. Snow fell harder now. Daniel pushed through the trees. The child in his arms, Rex running ahead. His breath came out in clouds, his muscles ached. But he did not stop. Behind them, faint red lights flickered in the forest. The hunters were still searching, slow and patient like predators tracking prey. At last the river appeared, frozen and silent under the pale sky. Daniel followed the edge until he found the caves he remembered. Dark mouths opening in the side of the cliffs, hidden by fallen branches and ice. He hurried inside the largest one, his boots crunching over frozen stone. The cave was cold and empty, but it was shelter. He placed the child gently on the ground. Covering it again with his coat, Rex circled the entrance, ears sharp watching. For a moment, Daniel allowed himself to breathe. But when he turned back, his breath caught. The child was clutching its wristband again, its glowing eyes filled with tears. It pressed a mark on the band and light filled the cave. This time the hologram was clearer. Daniel gasped as images flickered into the air. A great ship breaking apart in fire. Figures screaming, running, their glowing eyes filled with fear. The child standing with taller figures, parents maybe, before being pushed into a small pod. Then the pod shooting away into the dark of space. The image cracked and broke. But Daniel understood. The child was not just lost. It was the last survivor of a destroyed world. And those hunting it were not rescuers. They were executioners determined to erase every trace. The child turned its eyes to him, whispering something. A single word repeated again and again. Daniel didn't know the language, but the way it clutched his hand made the meaning clear. They killed everyone. His chest tightened. He had known danger was close. But now he understood the true weight of it. The hunters wanted to wipe out the last of this species. And now, because he had chosen to protect the child, he was part of the war. Rex whined, pacing near the entrance. Daniel crouched beside the child, speaking gently. "I don't understand your words, but I understand you." The child blinked slowly, listening. "I won't let them take you," Daniel continued. "I don't care what they are, or what they want." The words came out low and fierce, surprising even himself, but he meant them, every one. The child reached out with its thin hand and touched his chest, right over his heart. It whispered another word, softer this time. Daniel didn't know what it meant, but the sound carried warmth, like calling someone protector. Then, suddenly, Rex growled sharply. Daniel turned. At the entrance of the cave, faint red light flickered again. The hunters were closer. Daniel grabbed the child, pulling it deeper into the cave shadows. But then the wristband lit up on its own, glowing brighter than ever. The hologram returned, clearer than before. This time it showed something Daniel had not seen. A map of stars, systems, worlds, and at the center, one world marked with light. The child pointed weakly at it. Daniel realized it was showing home. The child's home. But then another image appeared. The hunter's symbol, a black circle with burning red lines. It spread across the stars, covering one after another. They were conquerors, destroyers, and this child carried proof of their crimes. Daniel's stomach turned cold. Now he understood. If the hunters killed the child, their secret would remain buried. But if the child survived, it could expose them. This wasn't just about one life, this was about truth. Truth that could change everything. The hologram blinked out, leaving only the dim glow of the wristband. Daniel looked at the child, who stared back with pleading eyes. You want me to protect this," Daniel whispered. The child nodded weakly. Daniel swallowed hard. He had never been a soldier, never been a hero, but somehow, the universe had chosen him. A simple man, his loyal dog, and a fragile alien child, against enemies far greater than he could imagine. Footsteps echoed outside the cave, heavy, metallic, drawing closer. Daniel's heart pounded. He gripped his knife tighter. Though it felt like nothing compared to what was coming, the child's wristband glowed brighter again. this time not with a hologram, but with a pulse of energy that spread across the cave walls like ripples of light. The hunters stopped. Daniel froze. The cave vibrated slightly, as if the band had triggered something ancient in the stone. The child whispered another word. Weak but urgent, Daniel leaned close, trying to listen. It repeated the word again and again. Finally, he understood the tone. It wasn't a plea, it was a warning. The child was telling him. "They're coming now," Rex barked, sharp and fierce. The hunter's red lights pierced through the cave entrance. Daniel's grip tightened on the knife. He turned to the child, its glowing eyes filled with trust. And in that moment, Daniel realized the truth. This was no longer about running, this was about standing. The hunters had destroyed one world. They would not destroy this child too. Not while he still breathed. The truth was clear, and it had changed him forever. The cave shook with echoes. Snow fell from the mouth of the cliffs, dust scattering through the cold air. Rex barked furiously, his body stiff, teeth bared. Daniel gripped his knife, heart pounding in his chest. The red lights outside grew brighter, sweeping through the trees. The hunters were here, they had found them. Daniel looked at the child, its glowing eyes filled with fear but also something stronger. Trust. It clutched his coat with its thin hands, whispering a broken word again and again. Daniel didn't know the meaning, but he knew what it was asking. "Don't leave me." He took a deep breath. He had always been just one man. A man with an old dog and a quiet life. He had never been a fighter, never a soldier, but tonight, fate had dragged him into a war not his own. And standing here in this frozen cave, he realized something. Humans might not have claws or machines, but they had something else, the ability to protect, to sacrifice, to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. The hunters stepped into view at last, tall, metallic, their faces hidden behind black masks. Their red eyes burned like fire in the snow. One of them raised a weapon, a long spear of light that hissed in the air. Daniel's breath caught. He pushed the child behind him. "Stay back," he whispered, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. Rex growled, his fur raised. The hunters scanned the cave, their machines buzzing. One of them spoke in a voice that sounded like broken glass. It was not human speech, but Daniel understood the meaning. "Hand it over." Daniel gripped his knife tighter. He should have been afraid, but he wasn't anymore. His fear had burned into something else, anger. They had already destroyed one world. They would not take this child too, no. Daniel said aloud. His voice echoed in the cave like a thunderclap. The hunters paused, their heads tilting in eerie unison. Daniel's heart pounded. He knew what would happen next, but he stood firm. The first hunter stepped forward. Rex lunged with a bark so fierce it filled the cave. He leaped at the machine, teeth snapping. The hunter swung its weapon. But Rex was fast. He bit into the metal arm. Shaking violently, sparks flew. The child cried out, its wristband glowing brighter, pulsing with wild light. Daniel rushed forward with a shout, slashing his knife against the nearest hunter. The blade scraped against metal, barely leaving a mark. But the force of his attack surprised the machine. Pushing it back, the second hunter raised its weapon. Aiming for the child, Daniel's blood turned to fire. "No!" he roared, throwing himself between them. The spear of light struck his shoulder, burning deep. Pain ripped through him. But he stood his ground, teeth clenched. He would not let them pass. The child screamed, its wristband exploding with light. The cave walls lit up like lightning. The hunters froze, their red eyes flickering. The light spread across the stone, patterns glowing. Symbols carved into the ancient cave shone like fire. Daniel stared in shock. The cave wasn't just stone, it was something older. Something powerful, and the child had awakened it. The hunters tried to advance, but the cave shook violently. The ground cracked under their feet. The light from the wristband connected with the walls, forming a shield of energy around the child. Daniel stood outside the shield, his body trembling. Knife in hand, Rex barked wildly, still locked onto the hunter's arm, refusing to let go. The lead hunter raised its weapon again. Daniel knew what was coming. This was it, the moment of choice. He could run and maybe survive, or he could stand, he could fight, not for himself, but for something greater. He turned. Looking at the child one last time, its glowing eyes stared at him, wide, full of tears. It whispered one word again. This time Daniel understood. The word was simple, soft. Friend. His chest ached. That was all the child saw him as, not a warrior, not a savior, just a friend. And that was enough. Daniel gripped his knife, blood dripping from his shoulder. He stepped forward. planting himself between the hunters and the child. "If you want this child," he growled, "you'll have to go through me." The hunters advanced, weapons glowing, but the cave itself seemed to roar with light. The child's wristband pulsed once more. Releasing a shockwave of energy, it blasted outward, striking the hunters with force. Their bodies sparked and staggered, metal shrieking. Rex tore free and leapt back. Barking triumphantly, the machine stumbled. Their red eyes flickering, one fell to the ground, its body collapsing in sparks. The others pulled back, retreating into the snow for the first time. Daniel saw fear in their movements. They had not won tonight. The child had unleashed something they had not expected. The light in the cave slowly faded. The wristband dimmed, its power spent for now. Daniel dropped to one knee, exhausted, his wound burning. The child crawled to him, glowing eyes filled with worry. It placed its small hand on his chest again. "Friend," it whispered once more. Daniel smiled weakly. He had made his choice, and he would make it again 1,000 times. The hunters would return. The danger was not over. But tonight, they had survived tonight. A human, a dog, and an alien child had stood together, and against all odds they had won. Daniel looked at the snow outside the cave. The world had changed, and so had he. Humans might not have machines or weapons like the hunters, but they had something stronger: the will to protect, the courage to stand, the power of choice. And tonight, Daniel had chosen. He had chosen to fight. He had chosen to protect. He had chosen to be human,